I'm Zach.
And I'm Darcy.
We're an LDS couple who struggled with unwanted pornography in our marriage for many years. What was once our greatest struggle and something we thought would destroy us has become our greatest blessing and triumph.
Our hope is that as you listen to our podcast each week, you'll be filled with hope and healing and realize that you too can thrive beyond pornography and create the marriage you have always desired.
Welcome to Thrive Beyond Pornography.
We're so glad you're here and we believe in you.
Hey everybody, and welcome to Thrive Beyond Pornography. I'm Zach and this is Darcy.
Hello.
All right. So last week we talked about what was going on for us as we grew up. Darcy and I kind of gave you the foundation of what we grew up with, how we got kind of the ideas that we got in our heads about pornography and sexuality and all of the really interesting stuff about when we were babies, when we were little kids, right? And all the way up into our teen years and right after I got home from my mission, essentially. This week, we want to talk about, we want to start with how we met. So the story that I always tell is that I was walking out of the Buffalo Grove, Illinois singles branch with a girl that I thought was cute. I was like, hey, let's go on a date. And then I saw Darcy, and I immediately turned around and went, and as she was walking into the building, I immediately was like, oh, hey, I'll see you later. And I turned around and walked back in the building with Darcy and went to church.
Because they were leaving to their
girl was
cars.
leaving.
And so I thought, oh, maybe I missed it. Maybe I am at the wrong time. And so I happened to say, hey, is this singles branch right now? Because I was confused by the fact that they were leaving the church, not entering. And he said, oh, yeah, it is. Let me show you. And he walked me in.
Yeah.
And that was how we met.
It sounds way more romantic when it's just like that I ditched this other girl. But the truth is I was the ward mission leader and I was like, yeah, I'll help you out. But she was a cutie. And in Buffalo Grove, there were less cuties than there are in other places. So I was like, hey, let's talk. Let's date. This is after my mission. So I was on the hunt. I was trying to find a wife. That started us.
That was Thanksgiving break. I was home from BYU, Idaho. And I was considering moving home. And my roommates were worried that if I moved home, being that I was the only member in my family and I had only been a member for about a year, they were worried that I would go inactive. And so I was like, I promise I'll go to church. And so I kept my promise to my roommates and I went to church, and that is when I met Zach. And
I asked her out on a date, and we went
to FHE.
Yeah.
That was the date.
Is that what it was?
Yeah.
And then our first real date
was over Christmas break.
Yeah, over Christmas break. And I'd gotten really sick, and Darcy was so desperate that she called me.
Yeah, well, it was funny
because I was so sick I didn't call her. I didn't even think about her. I was dying.
Between Thanksgiving and Christmas, we were doing I think it was AOL. I don't know, some kind of messaging system back in the day. And so we were chatting online, and he was like, hey, when you get back, I want to take you to the zoo to see the lights. It'll be super cool.
And I've still never seen the lights. To this day, I've never seen the lights.
And then I get home, right? And I'm waiting for this phone call because clearly he's going to call me, and nothing. He just totally stood me up. And I was like, wow, I'm kind of surprised.
Because he's not that hot.
I thought he was kind of into me, and I guess he's not. Anyways, but after a week of being at home with just my family, I was pretty desperate to hang out with someone that was my age. And so I called Zach, which that's way against my code of operation. I would never call a boy or, hold a boy's hand or hug a boy. The boys had to make the moves. And so me calling him was a really big deal. And it was actually December 23rd. And he said, oh, I'm so sorry. I've been so sick. I'm finally starting to feel better. Do you want to go out? And so we went to Gurney Mills.
Yeah.
It's a little out, a mall
it's
thing.
A large mall.
Yeah, I guess it's not little.
Yeah.
And we had Chinese food, and we went Christmas shopping for our moms. Super romantic.
And the very first store we walked into, this guy, we walked in there, like we had known each other in real terms, like face to face, maybe like a total of 3 hours.
Yeah.
And this guy who's in this store, he's like, "Oh, are you guys here to register for your wedding?" It was so awkward.
Because we were like looking at bowls or something to buy his mom, or silverware,
Yeah,
maybe. I
I
can't
have
remember.
no idea.
But we were
time
like,
ago.
no, actually, we basically just met.
That guy.
And
man,
then 3
if
weeks
only we could find
later,
that
we
guy.
were basically registering for our wedding.
If only we could find that guy and be like, you started something. I don't know. So we got engaged. We got married. We're going to fast forward a little bit here. And we were, I mean, we just spent that first year or so dealing with being newlyweds. And one of the things that, was a bump in the road was Darcy found some bikini pictures that I had been looking at online when we were at school at Rick's, BYU, Idaho at that point. And that was a tough thing for her. I had basically given her the impression that I never struggled with anything, and that she didn't need to worry about me. And then here comes this kind of blindside, as you must have been on our computer, our family computer.
Yeah.
And you find,
I mean, it was like calendar pictures or something. Like
Yeah.
It wasn't anything super illicit, but for me at that point, I was upset about it.
yeah. Tell them how upset you were.
Oh, I was very upset. I remember calling my friend Aubrey, like I pretty much always call Aubrey, and just talking to her and telling her how upset I was. And then through that conversation, I had found out about the book that he talked about in the last episode that his cousin had given to him. And it was pretty upsetting to me. And it definitely laid a foundation for a lot of secrecy and a lot of hiding, because I was very much like, no, this isn't okay. This won't be in my marriage. And if you do this, basically I'm leaving. Like I won't be married to a man who does this.
So I got really good at hiding it. I got good at hiding what was going on for me. I got good at hiding who I really was. I got good at hiding my emotions from Darcy. And I think, and you would probably say this, you were not really a safe person for me to talk to, and to share what was actually happening for me.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that now, looking back, but
then you wouldn't have
definitely
said that.
Then I would.
Then
not
you would have said, "Why aren't you a
that.
better husband to me?
Yeah,
why don't you make it all better and be my knight in shining armor?" So that was tough. That was a difficult time for both of us, partly because we were learning how to be grown-ups together, but also because I couldn't be really real with her, with you. So
we got married in 2003.
Yeah.
And then if we fast forward to 2008, that was September of 2008 was when I was using Zach's work laptop, and I opened it, and there was like what I would consider full-blown pornography. And I was shocked. I was definitely not expecting it. We'd been married for 5 years at this point, and we had just had a miscarriage 3 days prior, that like landed me in the ER, ambulance ride, all of that good stuff. And so I was in a pretty low place to begin with. And then seeing that on his laptop just was more than I could handle.
It was pretty devastating. And looking back, I can tell you now that I was definitely using pornography as a way to manage with the emotional difficulty of that time. It was very stressful. I was at a corporate job, and I was starting my MBA, and then we have this miscarriage, and there's a lot going on for me as I'm doing all of that work, and I didn't know how to be emotionally vulnerable with Darcy, capable of like saying, "Hey, and to be honest, at that point, I thought, well, I just need to get a release. I need to get, I just need to get an orgasm. Essentially, I just need to manage my emotions or manage my my sexual urges so I can be there for all the other things that have to happen. so I can be 100% for all those other things. So that was me just kind of going into this place where all I was doing was managing myself mentally and emotionally through pornography, and I wasn't actually dealing with the grief of having this miscarriage and the stress of dealing with both an MBA and a pretty demanding corporate job. So there was a lot going on
and
there.
3 kids in 2.5 years.
Oh, yeah. Not to mention 3 kids in 2.5 years.
And buying our first house.
Yeah.
We had a lot.
It was a very busy time in our lives.
A lot of stress going on. I mean, look, it's funny because looking back, I could definitely say like, oh, that wasn't that bad, right? But when you're in the thick of it, it feels really heavy and like a lot of hard things. So
yeah, and I mean, we were moving forward. It wasn't like we were depressed and freaking out over everything, but I can see now that the way I was dealing with things was just not as healthy as I wanted it to be. And that was painful for me because I wanted to be this person that I showed you, that I pretended to you that I was, and I wasn't. I just wasn't that guy. Mm-hmm. And it was just this behind the scenes struggle, on again, off again, never succeeding, always trying. And, that's the night that Darcy took that laptop. She was so upset, and she just took that laptop and threw it down the stairs.
It survived.
Thankfully. It didn't get broken. But man, I mean, that was a real indicator to me that I can't be real with Darcy if I'm struggling. I have to manage that on my own, and I just have to be there for her. I have to manage her emotions. I have to manage what's going on for her. And that was tough. That was really tough for me.
And for me, it got me to this place where I was super angry. I was super depressed. I really struggled to take care of our kids. I really was not in a good place.
And I had to hide. Like, it was all hiding. Like, I could not show anything real to Darcy. I had to hide what was going on for me. I had to hide anything that, even if I came home and I was stressed about work, like, Darcy would ask, "Are you going to get fired?" And it was like, "No, I'm not getting fired. I just have work," right?
I had a lot of anxiety around pretty much everything, I would say, at that point. And when I found out, we met with our bishop, and he is a very nice man, and we love him to this day, and we actually still talk to him to this day.
Yeah.
But he definitely took away Zach's recommend.
This was essentially the beginning of this like long list of bishops we started talking to, and long list of therapists, while climbing the corporate ladder and then going to 12-step meetings. I mean, it was just, we were looking for help in every corner of the earth that we could possibly imagine finding it. And
at that point, we lived in Franklin, Wisconsin. Mm-hmm. And so we drove about 2 hours down. I don't remember exactly
down
where.
To Chicago somewhere.
Like maybe it was
a Chicago suburb.
Yeah, somewhere in Chicagoland to go to LDS Family Services, because that was the closest LDS Family Services counselor. And
it was basically the closest person that would be able to talk to us as a therapist who also shared some of our belief structures. So, we thought, if I go to a regular therapist, they're going to be like, well, who cares if you look at porn? But if I go to an LDS Family Services therapist, they're going to know that I'm dealing with an addiction and that I'm addicted to porn, and they'll know what to do to help me solve this. And the truth was, they had no idea, and they didn't have any tools, and they didn't have any skills, and they didn't know how to help guide us through this process. And that was, that was frustrating. Looking back, it was just this massive waste of time and resources, of belief and energy. I mean, it's just unfortunate that there weren't better resources at the time, to be honest.
And then 3 months after me finding out we were pregnant with what would be our fifth but fourth living child, and we just kept on going. And then in 2009, we moved to California. Zach had gotten a promotion from work, and we moved to California, which was a huge step for us. And that had been a year, it was like exactly a year
Mm-hmm.
from finding out, because we moved in September. And so during that year, we were meeting with therapists and everybody. I was under the impression that Zach was just squeaky clean, perfect, not struggling at all.
Right.
And so when we got to California and I found out that, oh, by the way, I've been lying to you the last year, then it was like low blow. It once again like brought me back down into that spiral of just depression and anxiety and, trying to control him, and just a really bad place for me, honestly. It was not a good time in my life. And I'd say it was probably the hardest year of my life. And I'll never forget, we went to this LDS therapist there. She was in our stake and someone recommended her. And I remember sitting in her home. She had a home office. And she said to me, "Is there any other way you can respond to Zach looking at porn besides angry?" And she was just like so sweet and so kind and calm. And I was like, no, I'm angry. I'm so angry. And I'm just so angry. And I like so full of like rage and emotions. And I like got up and I walked out of her office. I walked out her front door and I walked home. It was like probably a mile and a half. And I walked home all by myself, and which that was kind of a big deal for me, but it kind of gives you an idea of where I was and what I was dealing with, that I was willing to just like get up and walk home by myself rather than kind of try and figure out, okay, why is she asking me this? Be curious about that question. I couldn't see anything besides red anger.
Yeah, it was tough. I remember just sitting in that room with the counselor after you left, and I was like, I don't know what to do. I know that if I leave right now, I'm not going to make it any better. So I'm going to stay here with you, because I was honestly scared. I was like, I have no idea what to do. You're the therapist. Tell me what to do. Tell me how to deal with this. Tell me how to solve this problem so that my wife doesn't storm out of rooms with people because of what I'm doing.
Yeah.
It was this was the time when you were like, oh, well, if you're going to look at porn,
you're going to have a fat wife.
Yeah.
And then I started eating. I started eating to manage my emotions, which I had never done up until that point. It was a very clear decision that I had made that, oh, well, you're going to look at porn. That's it. Like I'm no longer going to strive to be this perfect hot wife that, I felt like I was up until that point.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was hard.
But we stayed together.
Yeah.
And we got pregnant. We were pregnant with our 5th and 6th. And this was the point that I was a bit upset with this, because I was done at 4 kids. And I think this is probably when we got pregnant with our 5th and 6th. This was probably the point where I decided began to push back on the idea that I have to give Darcy absolutely everything just because she wants it, since I'm a bad husband because I have this pornography struggle. And I continued to try and manage her through trying to make it so that she had anything and everything she wanted, because she wanted it, even though it wasn't necessarily good for our family or good for her or good for me or good for
our
us,
finances.
Or our finances. It was just one of those things where she asked for it, I would give it to her because I felt like I owed it to her because I was such a bad husband. So we have the twins, and I was pretty upset about it, actually, which I'm not proud of at this point, but it was a moment that I can recognize began this process of me saying, no, I'm not going to just say yes to you just because that's, that landed us in a place where we had 6 kids, 7 and under, and it was an enormous strain on our lives, just an enormous strain.
They were so cute, though.
They were. If you're friends with us on Facebook, you can see them. They're cute.
They're adorable.
They're good kids. And I was going to, so I was at that point I was meeting with a bishop, and I had a therapist, and I was going to 12-step meetings. And one night
I was going to the 12-step support for wives, and
plus we had all these freaking kids who, you know, needed to get to school and needed to get their schoolwork done and diapers changed. I mean, if you've never had twins, it's very different. Sometimes people come to us and they're like, "Oh, you've got twins." I had 2 kids close together, and it's got to be just like having twins. And I'm like, nope, it's not. It is.
We're
totally
like, no,
different.
we've done that. We've had kids about as close as you can get them.
Twins is a really, really stressful thing. If you had twins first, you you probably had no idea how much easier one baby was.
Yeah.
So I'm going to these 12-step meetings. One night after I go meet with the bishop, and then I go to the 12 steps, and I'm getting home at like who knows what time of the night. And Darcy meets me at the door, and she's just like, I don't need you to go to these meetings anymore. It's not getting better. And I just need you here to change diapers.
I remember at that point, like, we had a calendar that we would mark, like, good day, good day, good day, good day, and then like an X for a bad day. You know, like we were like keeping track, and we are very much like stuck in that addiction model, betrayal trauma.
Perfection is the only possibility here. It's perfection or nothing. It was a very difficult time for both of us. And I can tell you, she was very much distraught. Like, for her to say, I mean, you've heard how much energy she put into all of this anger and frustration up to this point when she learned that I was looking at porn. And for her to come to me and say, listen, forget it. I don't care if you look at porn. I just need you to be here to change diapers and put babies to bed because I physically cannot handle it all on my own. That's how much it cost her to say that. I mean, it was big.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, that was this moment where simultaneously a couple things happened. Number one, I knew that I still wanted to resolve this problem. It wasn't like when she said, listen, I don't care if you look at porn. That wasn't some sort of absolution where all of a sudden I was like, oh, yeah, I'll just look at porn all the time and it's not a big deal. I'm going to do whatever I want. And I think oftentimes this happens for a lot of people where their spouse or somebody, they let go of some part of whatever it is they're dealing with. And we think that there's this slippery slope that's automatically going to take them all the way down to the bottom and they're going to become, I don't know, serial killers or whatever. But the truth is, that's not what happened for me, and I doubt that happens for most people. I think most of the time, once you let go of something, you can actually start to grab onto what you actually want and actually need. And when she let go of that, she really let it be my problem. It stopped being her problem, and it started to just be mine. And it was and that allowed me to go, well, is this really a problem I want to continue to have? Is this a problem I want to solve? And if it's a problem I actually want to solve, how do I solve it? Because up to this point, I'd spent a number of years, so this has been 4 years in the making, trying to solve this problem and not succeeding. And so I looked at all the things I was doing and I said, well, if it's not working, let's try something different. Mm-hmm. And we're going to talk about that in next week's episode and start talking about what I did and how things changed and why they changed and what we did to change.
And what started to change for me also.
Right.
But I think a really important part of our story too, those years in California, was that we started to be open with our friends.
Yeah.
And we had a few good friends, and they knew that Zach was struggling with pornography, and they knew how I was struggling. And we were just open and honest about what was real for us and what was going on. And I think for Zach, having that support of those, like Steve and Austin are names, but of those two, and just knowing that they were still our friends and they still loved us and cared about us, even though this is what we were struggling with, I think made a big difference. And we did have a really great bishop when we lived in Thousand Oaks, and he was different than a lot of them.
Yeah.
But he was great. And
well, and I think it's important to recognize none of the bishops I ever spoke to had any actual answers for me. But what each of them did have for me, like none of them were like able to give me any real concrete ways to solve for my pornography habits. But what each of them did have for me was love. And Steve Barris and Austin Baleo, who I mentioned in the book, in one of the chapters that I wrote for Richard Ostler's book,
one of the sections
under the pornography chapter, they both were willing to just love me for who I was and be available to me.
And when I would go out of town, they would call Zach and, invite him over for dinner or invite him to go play basketball or whatever. It was nice having support outside of just our immediate
and us. So, the first thing that I got was this kind of momentary understanding. Yes, I guess none of this stuff is working. The next thing I got was essentially, I can figure this out. And I am one of those guys who, me and YouTube, we can figure anything out. I got to fix a car. Let's fix a car. I got to build a house. Let's build a house. I can do anything with YouTube. And and a little bit of learning, wherever it comes from, whether it's YouTube or something else. But I thought about my pornography struggle, and I thought, the answer's got to be there. But for whatever reason, nobody seems to be able to give me the answer that I need. And at this point, the only resources that were essentially available were 12 steps. If you had an addiction of any stripe in the United States for the last 80 years, 12 steps is all you ever really get. And I figured, you know what? That's not working. It's not working for me. And, little did I know that the research is pretty clear. 12 steps isn't as effective at solving these kinds of problems as we might have been led to believe. But that meant that I had two things. One, I had to figure it out, and I had to do it on my own. And that was a little bit daunting, but it was really freeing because I like figuring things out. And that was this kind of turn. That was one of the main turning points in our lives, and I think in our marriage. And I'm so grateful that Darcy was like, listen,
enough is enough.
Stop going to these meetings. They're useless. Not because she thought they were useless necessarily, but because she didn't see any results. And that's a big deal. That's a really important component. When the results aren't showing up.
Well, and I just didn't see any real change either, right? It just seemed like we were kind of going through the same pattern year after year after year. And I just was like, why are we doing this? This is a waste of time.
Yeah.
We need to do something different. And if the difference is just that you're home more hours a week than not, then I'll take it.
Right. So that's where we started. We started with me home more. And then,
that was when we really started to make big changes.
And we'll tell you what that looks like next week. But hopefully this has been helpful. Hopefully for you hear something of your struggle in what we've talked about. Because the truth is, everybody out there who is struggling with a pornography habit, or if you want to call it an addiction, that's just fine. But if you're struggling, I imagine that you have felt the way that we felt. Deep despair, extraordinary frustration, and even a great deal of anger because you thought you were doing it all right. And I hope that you will hear this message and know that there's a light at the end of the tunnel. And we're going to talk about how that works next week, but I hope that you can see there's more available to you than all that deep despair. All right, my friends, we're looking forward to talking to you next week. Have a great week. Please feel free to sign up for a free consult at zachspafford.com/workwithzach. All right, my friends, we hope you have a great week. We'll talk to you next week.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks for listening to Thrive Beyond Pornography. If you're seeking guidance and support to overcome pornography for good and begin creating a thriving life beyond it, check out my free webinar, How to Overcome Pornography with Skills That Actually Work. You'll learn practical, proven skills guided by an expert coach who has personally overcome pornography. Whether you're getting started for just yourself or along with your spouse, Darcy and I can teach you the tools that will help you put your life on the right path for you. Be sure to check out the show notes for a direct link, and if you could take a moment to leave a review wherever you listen to podcasts, it would mean the world to us. Your reviews play a significant role in helping others discover the show so they can join us on this transformative journey. Thank you for being part of the Thrive Beyond Pornography community. Until our next episode, stay strong, stay focused, and keep thriving.